Hello, my name is Rand, and today we're going to talk about 5 tips on how many worlds you might want to build over the course of your career. These tips come from my book, 185 Tips on World Building, which you can either get for 99 cents or free by looking in the video description and clicking the appropriate link. Have a look around at the other things that are down there because I have other things that are available for free. My first tip is to determine your goals. If you are planning to write books or design games for many years, like 5, 10, 15, 20, then maybe it makes more sense to create one world that you spend a lot of time on and create in great depth. Otherwise, you might be spending a lot of time creating different worlds. For example, let's say over the course of 20 years, you just create that one world. The alternative is maybe you write 20 novels, and for each one of them, you have to build a world. That would be 20 worlds you have to build. That could be considerably more work than just creating the one that's really in depth and you can use for your whole career. So this is something to consider. I also recommend doing a kind of hybrid approach, which is having a main world that you spend more time on, and then doing these kind of smaller, less in-depth world-building worlds for a single novel here or a short story or something that's a smaller project. The size of your the scope of your work is going to determine how big a world-building job you have before you. My second tip is to use extreme worlds sparingly. For example, maybe you have a world that is mostly fire. That's very volcanic, like that one film from the Star Wars trilogy where Darth Vader finally got chopped into little bits and finished becoming Darth Vader. Such a world is interesting, but it's not the kind of place that we're probably going to set something like a trilogy or a longer set of books just because it's so extreme that it will really dominate the story. Now, if we want it to really dominate the story, that's fine, but more often than not, we don't really want that. So in something like science fiction where they can travel to different worlds very easily, this is a good place for these. But most of the worlds will be a more normal setting. We can do the same thing in fantasy. We just have a tendency to assume that it's mostly happening on one world or even on just one continent, but there's really no reason why the characters can't take magic portals or just cast spells that have them going to these more extreme worlds. But even so, they're probably not from such a world. They're only going to be visiting these sparingly, and that's the best use we have for them, as a way to spice things up for ourselves and for our audience. And that leads right into tip 3, which is to be Earth-like most often. No one's going to get upset if we have a planet that is basically Earth by another name, and one of the reasons for this is that this is probably the default approach that most world builders take. And it's something that we need to get good at too, because we're probably going to be using them more often than these extreme worlds. Most of our characters are probably from these Earth-like worlds too, and it's going to be something that's a little bit unusual that comes from the more extreme worlds. There's also the weirdness factor. If we have a really strange planet, a lot of people might not really be into what we've done. We might think it's a great idea, and they don't. And if we have a series of, say, 10 books that's all taken place in this really weird place, maybe that's great, and maybe it's not. So there can be risk there, but as we all know, with greater risk comes greater reward. You will have to decide for yourself how much risk is worth it. Tip number 4 is to reclaim lost time. As most of us know, world building can be really time-consuming. And in a lot of cases, we are putting aside other things we want to do, like writing a book, to do world building. And while that's fine, what I'm recommending is that you take moments where you are already not really accomplishing anything and accomplish something, in this case, world building. For example, we've all walked into somewhere and found ourselves standing in a huge line, and we're not going to really be doing anything. So we could be texting our friends or playing a game, but I would recommend you pull out your phone and do some world building. Put it into an email that you sent yourself, write down some notes. If you use a website like WorldAnful, if it works well on your small device, go ahead and pull it up and just get your world building in when you don't have anything else to do anyway. This is a little bit more productive than wasting time playing video games, even though we all do that, and it's good to have some downtime like that. There have been also really big periods of my life where I couldn't do any writing. An example would be college. For 4 years, I was focused on my music degree. You can see my guitars hanging back there behind me. That was my focus. So I did a tremendous amount of world building on my main setting. A few years later, that same college degree in classical guitar gave me severe tendonitis in both arms. And one of the things I lost was the ability to type. So what did I do? I spent a lot of time world building. I couldn't concentrate enough to write a book, but no one was going to be reading my files and read all these disjointed sentences because I was distracted. So I sat around and I did a tremendous amount of world building. I looked at that as a gift that the younger me could give the later me, and it's one that I'm hoping to enjoy a little bit more as I get started on my writing career. Tip number 5 is not to get overwhelmed. It can be easy to see these huge lists of things that we could be doing and just feel like we're never going to get through this. So it can help to make a list of things that you actually need to do based on your story. And having a goal like that to tell your story is another way to avoid getting sucked into this rabbit hole of world building where you never come back out again. One of the ways to speed it up is to essentially do Earth by another name, and there's no reason we can't get away with this. Using analogs, which is discussed in another one of these tip series videos, is another way to speed things up. But in the end, you have to remember this is fun. If you're not having fun, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. And also, sometimes we feel like we have to be doing some of this, but that can often be a false expectation. Sometimes we feel like others are expecting us to invent a species, for example, but they really aren't. And we can get away with trimming down what our workload is. So remember to have fun and try not to get overwhelmed. Okay, that's it for these 5 tips. Please remember to like and subscribe to this channel. And these tips are based on the book 185 Tips on World Building, but that is actually based on my series, The Art of World Building, which is the name of this channel. And these tips came from book 1, which is Creating Life. All the information is below in the episode description. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. By the way, if you'd like more stuff to help with world building, my artofworldbuilding.com site has a bunch of free templates that you can download by joining the mailing list. You can click the link in the episode description or the little information button in the upper right-hand corner. There are over 20 of these templates, as you can see from this list. Most of them are Microsoft Word documents, but the 2 calculator ones, which come from my Creating Places book, are Excel spreadsheets that take care of the math for you. You can just type in measurements from a map and find out how long it takes to go somewhere by dragon, wagon, foot, or even ships. If you're enjoying the video, remember to click the like button and subscribe.